Hello and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pam Cohn, and it's my privilege to serve as a host for this podcast series. We are so excited to have with us today Anna Krotova, a sustainability director and a pioneer in sustainability. She's been working in the field since 2010, always advocating for transparent and responsible business practices, rooted in respect for planetary boundaries and human rights. And also Jennifer Geary, a senior executive with more than 25 years of experience in finance, technology, risk, and legal across a variety of industries. And she has a range of best-selling business books. We're going to talk to them today about their soon-to-be-released book, How to Be a Chief Sustainability Officer, Leading the Transition to a Sustainable Organization. Welcome, Anna, and welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So each of you has had a stellar career, as I hinted at in my introduction. How did you find each other? And what motivated you to write this book, and why now? So we'll start with Jennifer.
Thank you, Pam, for having me. My interest in book writing, and I guess in carving up and explaining senior C-suite roles, started about 7 years ago. I had done my first COO role, and although I had a strong background in topics like finance and legal and risk, I couldn't believe how broad the role was and how little was written about it. And that prompted me to write my first book, How to Be a COO. Which follows a certain framework. It breaks down the role, it explains it, it makes it more accessible, and it links to frameworks and checklists and all sorts of useful tools for the aspiring COO. I think what happened was Anna found my book and read my book and really liked, she was trying to understand the role of the COO in a sustainability role that she was doing. She loved the approach that my book took. And I just looked, Anna, it was just over a year ago, you sent me a message on LinkedIn and said, I don't suppose you'd think about collaborating on a Chief Sustainability Officer book. So that was my experience of how it started.
And so, yes. Anna, what prompted you to do this now?
Well, really, the dynamic we have here in Europe with CSRD, which has really catapulted the sustainability role to strategy, to finance, to legal. And what I'm seeing is that there are really two camps of people and professionals now that are coming into this role. So there's a group of people who have been in the business and know the business very well and know a corporation very well, but they're really new to the sustainability domain. And then there is the other group of sustainability professionals who are being hired externally. They may come from consulting, they may come from NGOs, but they're experts in sustainability, but they don't really know how to navigate an organization and how to actually build this function from the get-go in an entirely different environment, in a corporate environment, which is different to anything else. And so when I read Jenny's book, the COO book, I really sort of gulped it over the weekend, and I thought to myself, gosh, I wish there was a book like this for sustainability professionals. And I thought, why don't I send her a note? Jenny and I have never met in person. We met once at a work event, and that was it. Then 2 weeks after contacting her, we started writing the book. And we really wanted to make it very practical and really what this job is about. How do you do it? Was the kind of the pain point and the question that we tried to answer.
So I'll stick with you, Anna, for the next question. Throughout your research and in writing the book, what would you say is the biggest challenge for CSOs?
I would say it's being understood. So corporate sustainability really graduated from and shifted from being treated as a bit of a paramilitary wing of the marketing department. And that's not me who said it. That's Alison Taylor who said it, another wonderful sort of author and thinker in the space. So it shifted from that to providing strategic input about the resiliency of the business and its long-term, survival, really. And essentially, it's expanding our traditional understanding of risk. And in doing so, it's building on a whole body of subject matter knowledge and history of work that organizations and teams are simply not familiar with. And so translating that and driving that sort of home can be a bit of a challenge. We have a whole generation of boards that operated in a world in which sustainability just wasn't on the agenda, really. So they need time to upskill. Change takes time. We have enthusiasts in the company who really see sustainability in a very sort of narrow, maybe somewhat sort of simplistic way, and they only want to talk about the good things, like volunteering, which frankly for sort of many companies has nothing to do with their material topics. So it's really bringing everyone to one baseline. You have stakeholders who just want to do sort of compliance and protect themselves from all the regulatory changes, which is fair as well. So how do you find common ground across all of these and get everyone sort of to the point faster? And then on the technical side, I'd really say it's about resourcing, right? So that's budgets, that's teams. Companies hire CSOs and they sort of drop them a little bit sometimes in the organization, and they expect them to navigate that all by themselves. So really understanding that this is a function like any other, and it has, different centers of expertise that need staffing and that need budget and investments is key. And the second one I would say is data collection and strong internal controls, because my background is at GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, and though we've advocated for voluntary reporting for 20 years, and there are companies who have done that, who have been doing that for many years, you still come to companies and you still, find gaps in sustainability data. So that's the other one, and that's a big one.
It's a big one because even companies who have been doing it voluntarily to date have sort of been doing it the Excel spreadsheet way, and that's just not sustainable. It's with all of the new disclosure and reporting requirements coming on the horizon, there's no way you can meet those obligations by keeping things, tracking things in an Excel spreadsheet. It has to be a systemic tool that will help gather and manage and maintain all that data. So Jennifer, I'm going to move to you for the next question, because it builds on what Anna just said about what is needed to succeed as a CSO. What advice would you give to a board of directors or, a chief executive officer who is looking to hire their first CSO?
Yeah, I think the book is very helpful in that regard, because it breaks down and sort of challenges you as to what you're really looking for in your CSO. So, are you prepared to, for example, pivot your strategy to align that with a full sustainability agenda, and you want a strategic advisor who will help move your organization that direction? Do you need an inspiring leader to change the culture and get people behind sustainability? Or are you looking for pure compliance, right? And you want to just stay on the right side of the law? And I think depending on, those are just 3 examples, but depending on what you're looking for, you might be looking for quite different people and quite different approaches. So I would counsel any chief executive board nominations committee to really think about what their goal is in taking on a CSO, because as Anna said, it's a big appointment with a huge amount of expectation behind it. And I think once you're clear on that and you're honest with yourself about what you're prepared to do as an organization, then make sure that when you bring that person on board, that you're creating a supportive and conducive environment for them, that you're backing up the agenda, that they don't see daylight between what the CSO is saying and what the CEO is saying, because people are clever and they're smart and they pick up those things. And it's very easy for a role like this to get undermined. If there are, and we talk about this in the book, if there are conflicts between, say, a revenue goal or a growth goal and a sustainability goal, you've got to bring those out, because people will see them. And if you don't make that clear, then people will assume that one is being favored over another.
And you bring up an interesting point, and it's a question that I often get asked. To whom should a CSO report? And I'll leave this one with Jennifer, but then I want Anna's comments as well.
Yeah, and this was an area, Anna and I went back and forth on this one. And actually, this is one of the really interesting things about this book, because I've come from a business side and Anna's come from the sustainability side. We did find ourselves at times debating back and forth on this. I would always say for something like this, I would want to report as senior as possible. So in an ideal world, I would say I would want the CSO to report into the chief executive and be on the executive committee. Whereas I think, Anna, what you've kind of, explained to me is it sort of depends on what you're looking to do, and it depends on the role and the personality of that CEO as well. If you need to do some really detailed carbon accounting work, if you need to focus on reporting or investor relations, you may be better sitting under a COO, under, investor relations, the CFO, marketing. There's actually multiple places where, Anna, you've seen it successfully done.
I've seen many things, right? I've seen many setups, and we talk about it in the book about the benefits and disadvantages of each, and when these scenarios work. So some of the more successful companies I've seen in terms of transformation are those where the CEO and the CSO really sit behind one table and they work very closely together for a year or so until they determine that transition pathway. And then once that is kind of rolling and is there, the CSO can go and reduce the frequency of that interaction with the CEO, while CEO is still being closely involved. What we see in Europe happening a lot is the sustainability function being placed under the CFO and in the finance department, largely because of CSRD, because what CSRD is doing, it's really lifting the bar and the quality of sustainability reporting to that of financial reporting. And it's really making the sort of internal controls function and finance function work very closely with the sustainability function on data. And that works as well. And then again, depending on the size of the team, on the mandate of the team, you might decide to place the CSO with the operations director, supply chain manager, again, depending on what the key material topics are and what actually needs addressing at a particular moment. I'd say there's no one size fits all, but definitely this role needs to have exposure and it needs to be empowered, and that comes only from sort of CEO sort of
Endorsement
blessing and endorsement. Exactly. Yeah.
And to add to what both of you just said, if truly this is a CSO, the person should be on par with all the other officers, the chief legal officer, the chief HR officer, the chief financial officer, because this person is going to need input and collaboration from all of those people in order to get the job done. And it's a much different feeling when you're a peer than when you're a subordinate asking for a favor, right? That it can't be seen as somebody asking for a favor. It has to be a peer initiative, peer-led project across all of those divisions. So this is obviously a growing career for people who have been in sustainability for a long time or people who are looking to get into it. What advice would you give somebody who's interested in exploring transitioning their career or starting their career on this path? Anna.
Yes. And again, something we write about in the book, if you, first of all, explore and inventarize the skills that you have, right? There is a big demand for CSOs, but equally, not all of them need to come from sustainability or with sustainability expertise. So if you're in finance, your expertise in financial reporting and structuring, in finding finance, structuring sort of capitalizations, that could be all very helpful when you talk about green CapEx, OpEx, and so forth. If you come from supply chain or operations, understanding what's going on in supply chains and how does procurement work, very helpful. If you're just starting your career and you're looking into this, I would look at what do you want to specialize in, because sustainability is such a broad field and there are many interesting and important topics to address. So do you want to go deep on a topic? Do you want to be sort of a broad sort of generalist? There are different career tracks there and benefits of each way. And then for CSOs who are really applying to companies, we have a whole checklist of things they should be checking for, which is, and screening for during interviews is, why are you being hired? Try to fill that out. What does the organization want from you? How mature is the organization? What processes exist? What commitments have been made already? Are you coming in to sort of fix something? Are you coming to improve something? Are you coming to build something from scratch? And are you, ready? Do you have the energy for that? Because it's a lot of, it's a lot of work. It's a high energy environment. So there's lots of things to sort of consider before you make your pick. I don't know, Jenny, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot. I trained as a chartered accountant and I studied all my financial reporting standards, and I can see how that discipline works so well now with the IFRS and with the sustainability reporting standards. A lot of the same disciplines are going to be put in place there, whether you're an auditor or whether you're doing the reporting. I mean, the only other one that you didn't mention, I think is like that risk piece. So I've spent most of my career in and around risk in some capacity. So as an auditor, first line of defense or second line of defense roles. And fortunately, maybe it was premonition, but when I wrote my risk book, I left a chapter. I left the last one for sustainability being the most fundamental risk of all. But the overlaps and how you think about risk and how you identify, manage, and there's different ways of taking on risk. You can insure against it, you can stop doing the activity, you can outsource it, you can, there's not just one way of dealing with something. And I think that kind of risk interrogation mindset is also very useful in the sustainability space as well.
Excellent. So what do you think the future will hold? And by the future, I mean the rest of 2024 into 2025 in the ESG space. What's coming next? Anna?
Well, this is really a fascinating moment and an important moment to be in, because we really need to see how the system will react. And what I mean by that is we've put all the legislative infrastructure and mechanisms in place to hold companies accountable. But how and to what extent that will play out is something that we've yet to see. So, assurance service providers, for example, I know they're increasing their insurance premiums because they have to now be issuing assurance statements on reports that are, frankly, not all of them will be meeting sort of compliance requirements. So that's a very interesting dynamic. We have different civil society groups that are strengthening the muscle around greenwashing, and it's become very easy to file a case against a company on all sorts of sort of greenwashing grounds. So would be good to see sort of what happens there. Member states in the EU, they are putting various supervisory bodies of regulation that the EU releases locally. So the CSDDD, CSRD. So on the risk side, I think we'll probably see stakes for companies increase more, maybe a few loud cases. And we'll probably see the emergence of a sustainability lawyer profession, but really how all of us will respond, whether it will be a race to the bottom or a race to the top, is very important in this end of 2024 and beginning of 2025. And on the opportunity side, I think we'll see companies get more focused in their efforts. Unilever is a great example where essentially they've come out with a new strategy and they said, look, we wanted to address too many things. We couldn't. We acknowledge that. And now we're going to focus on these three, but they're really going to do it well. And I think that's what many companies are realizing. Forget big materiality matrices full of all sorts of topics. Focus on a few things that you can control and do them very well.
That you can control and that have the greatest impact, right? What's most meaningful and material to that particular entity. And that's not trying to be all things to all people. It's like Unilever's example, very strategic, very focused. Jennifer, anything to add? What's in store for us over the next 18 months?
Yeah, I think just to add to that point, the pendulum always swings, doesn't it, from kind of early exuberance into a more deeper understanding of what this is about and a more realistic assessment of what's happening. So I think that's good. I think Anna's talked about the regulatory regime in the EU. I mean, I think you almost have sort of the triple crown of artificial intelligence and its regulation, supply chain and its regulation, and sustainability and its regulation all coming together. And I just want to echo a point that you said at the very beginning, which is we are rapidly entering a place where, due to the complexity of organizations and the complexity of regulation, it's just not possible to keep track of that other than via, I think, technological means. It's just become too complex. So I think you're going to see a lot of organizations, a lot of law firms, a lot of legal, that just the absolute continued rollout of RegTech is going to be huge. And of course, we've got COP29. We're looking at things like climate finance there as well. And of course, we all continue to watch what's happening in the external environment as well in our world as we see things play out over time.
And there is a lot happening around the world. So based on that, and based on the complexities of this space and working in this space and trying to affect change, it's a very challenging environment. I'm curious to hear from each of you as we wrap it up today. What gives you hope? Let's start with Anna.
Well, I'm a CSRD optimist, right? In Europe, it has certainly and undoubtedly it's the single biggest victory for sustainability that we've had in many, many years. And essentially, it admits that organizations are open systems that constantly interact with the world around them, and they acknowledge that, you know, the world has sort of different problems and we're creating those problems and we need to address them. And all of that is driving a much deeper reflection about companies' dependencies and their impacts on the world. And it's making that conversation more, more focused. I want to give an example about diversity from a company that works in the service industry, and they've made sort of certain choices about how they want their employees to look, those employees that interact with consumers. And they realize at a certain point that there's just not enough of talent pool of people who look like they want, their employees to look. And so now they're venturing into that whole conversation about diversity. And arguably it's not from a place of sort of high moral standing, it's out of place of constraint. But they will, they have to focus on this because this is what the world looks like, right? And they will address it well, I think. And through that, they will still make a positive impact in that vast space of, social inequality and so forth. So I think that's that focus and that really kind of being real about, different issues is what makes me optimistic. And also the talent that is going into the sector from all sides. People are smart, they see, they feel the issues, and they choose to spend their time on this. And that's very good.
And I think something that you earlier said relates to what you just said, is that this is a business decision, right? A business sustainability, business viability decision, not just volunteering, but core to the business and strategic to the business. And I think that's what your book emphasizes. Jennifer, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the ability of nature to heal when we let it. And I think sometimes we don't talk about the victories enough. So whether it's looking at overfishing and letting our oceans rest and replenish, whether it's through, not using chlorofluorocarbons, what that, that helped close some of the damage that was there before. And I think there's and rewilding. I think just looking at the possibilities for that, there's a place in the UK called KNEPP Nature Reserve, which was just an exhausted and unprofitable farm that allowed itself to rewild and has now seen songbirds come back to the UK that haven't been here for years, otters, wild buffalo now grazing. If we can just, as Anna says, if we can point some of the greatest minds to this problem, and if we can just create the space to let our earth heal, it has shown the capacity to do that, and that's what gives me hope.
Well, both of your explanations are what gives me hope. This has been a wonderful conversation. For those of you listening, by the time this podcast airs, the book will be available on Amazon. Again, it's How to Be a Chief Sustainability Officer, Leading the Transition to a Sustainable Organization, by Anna Krotova and Jennifer Geary. Thank you both so much for the time you spent with us on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.